We would wish that reality was black and white. We would wish, perhaps, that everything was ultimately clear, that art was pure and purely ethically good, that ambiguity was only part of the plot, and that we could contain it and resolve it and understand it by putting it within the pages of art. We would wish that colors were no more than our perception of the spectrum of visible light. But this is not the case, and color is a most powerful symbolic indicant in our world. Indeed, even these stark colors, black and white, are freighted with shades of meaning and complexity and pain. From the position of the counterculture artist, R. Crumb is unafraid to explore these questions. What I ask is whether art can remain on the margins of counterculture, speaking its truth to the center, its critique, educating, or whether art, any art, is ultimately at risk of being commodified itself, part of the very problem it decries. I asked this question of the first story in Zap 1, White Man. White Man has the focus of an academic introduction. And just glancing at the page, we see that upon opening the cover, we enter into the very world that Mr. Natural and the little old lady drove into. There's White Man trudging along the street that they were on. And so, as we look, we see the page has a certain aesthetic that is entirely Crumb's. On the one hand, his lines are folksy in their way, not drawn with a straight edge, not perfected. They express the idiosyncrasies of his hand. But at the same token, they're surprisingly straight, and his grid wonderfully lined up, and he captures both the organization of the comic's page, but also the individuality of his own expression. Indeed, in the puffy shapes of his letters and in the texture of his grid, there's an energy emerging. And as our eye casts over the page, we see that energy emerging in that last panel. That mad scientist, evil genius that he depicted of himself comes out right in that last panel. Let's read. Poor old White Man is on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He's a real product of the Great Depression. I've tried. God knows I've tried. Look out. Keep a tight asshole. A story of civilization in crisis. I think I definitely need some kind of treatment. White Man always keeps hair in place. White Man! Madame. Tutu, how are you? Saw your wife at the dog show. Sigh. It's such an effort being polite anymore. White Man has round-the-clock protection. But if I stop, they'll see. They'll find out. My real self. Deep down inside, the raging, lustful beast that craves only one thing. Sex. I'm so virile. I read Playboy. I'm a bad ass. And so White Man sets out Crumb's introductory statement. It begins with a title, White Man, that puts us on alert right away. For on one hand, the title seems innocuous, puffed up in balloon-like font. On the other hand, however, the title puts us in mind of Superman, the greatest of comic heroes. White Man would be Clark Kent walking along the street. But he would also be Superman, in that throughout the page he wrestles with perfecting himself. And so Crumb gives us his topic statement right in the beginning. A story of civilization in crisis. And we know from reading the title that it's parodic, that it's all wrapped up in superhero tropes. And indeed, White Man is a real product of the Great Depression, just like Superman. Superman showed us that two Jews from Ohio could create a new generic force, a myth for American power and decency. And so White Man is also a product. He's Clark Kent trudging along the city streets, trying to keep his hair in place. So Crumb lays out an argument. Keep it tight, asshole. Have a perfect identity. Just like Captain America, just like Mary Kennedy. Perfect yourself. But in White Man, this world of artifice is not the resolving identity. It's merely a trope over the self. Indeed, in the last tier, middle panel, White Man, like Clark Kent, begins to open up his shirt. That's exactly what Superman does. Superman strips off his clothes and reveals himself in his underwear. And he's happy to be in his underwear. And that's the true self of White Man as well. And so, if the title is White Man, and that puts us on notice, and if the topic is a civilization in crisis, and if the argument is about trying to keep a tight asshole, the desire for perfect identity in a world of artifice in which the self is trapped within, Crumb's thesis is clear. The assertion of the overriding libido is the common denominator of us all. I think that the argument is this points out the hypocrisy of the middle class. In a sense, if Captain America were a hero trying to turn against the fifth column, the corrupt aspect within the American nation, White Man suggests accepting the fifth column, that it's in us all, accepted. It is our identity. And so, as the comic proceeds, White Man wrestles with being an American. He bumps chests with his fellow American. He eagles a woman. He climbs into his giant car, and finally he has a drink and feels a lot better. And then in the last page, leaving the bar, he encounters a group. Ha ha! Let's pull his pants down. Off they comes, White Man. Ha! Get weighty. No, please, think of my dignity, my family. Help, police! Hee haw, ha 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 ha. He's so embarrassed, ha ha. Oh God, I'm so embarrassed. How could they do this to me? I'm White Man. Yeah, well, listen, bud. You just a nigga like everybody else. No more, no less, mother. But Be cool, Dad, listen. Hear that laughing and singing coming down the street? I don't hear nothing. Scram. Man, you was just plain nasty. Come on, nigga, you got music in your soul, remember? I don't know what you're talking about. Sure enough, he plumb forgot. Hey, come on. We's all joining the parade. Yowza. I got happy feet. Will White Man join the parade? Some other time. Foolish nonsense. Is it too late? Seems rather silly. Low class. What's the world coming to? Might be fun. Oh, eventually. So Zap number 1 is about racist sentiments. It's about racism. And it argues that White Man has music in his soul, that he's just like everyone else. And so it gives us a moral lesson. Join the parade. Ultimately, we're all the same. And if we learn to loosen up, we can all recognize that music, art, happiness lies in us all. So the argument would be, I think by extension, get rid of the suit. Don't be Clark Kent and be Superman. However, Zap 1 also makes this statement by exhibiting a racist statement. Why make it this way? Why have the story move towards race? Certainly, black people are not more authentically soulful, and on a certain level, Crumb's text argues that. On another level, though, it holds out racist stereotypes as a way in to the issue of equality. It has fun with those racist stereotypes. It is implicated in the very views it strives against. And so I think it brings up a twofold question. On the one hand, we ask whether the role of artist privatizes a public statement. Crumb has identified himself as a mad artist, working feverishly, and so this is just his statement. He doesn't mean it for the world. However, on the other hand, I would ask, can you participate in these codes without endorsing them? In a way, I'm asking, was Wortham right? That comic books give us a language. They give us a language of racism, of sexism, and of brutality. And even as they would attempt to contain that language within stories that resolve themselves in either justice or in a larger realization of equality, they still use that language. So I leave us then struggling with this question. Can you use these codes and undermine them completely? Or by repeating these codes, do you in fact insist that we all recognize them and speak accordingly? So my conclusion here is that art is not pure. Art does not stand apart from the world it attempts to depict and comment upon. That even as a counterculture mad scientist, Crumb has to face up with the fact that he's using racism and illustrating racism and spending time drawing out racist characters. Now, he may say that his role as an artist privatizes that he can do whatever he wants. But nevertheless, his art leaves him and becomes public. And thus, I would say that we need to recognize that anything privatized, and here's Crumb's keep on truckin' down the line. Hey, I said keep on truckin' my blues away. That Crumb's trademark image, keep on truckin', becomes commercialized itself. Indeed, even the whole underground comics mode eventually became promoted by Marvel Comics. And here is Marvel Comics' comic book. Anything privatized can become commercialized.